The Osirion is believed to be a cenotaph. It's located at the rear of the Temple of Seti I in Abydos, Egypt, and archaeologists date it to the same time as the building of the Temple of Seti. So that's about 3,300 years ago. And this is all despite the style being that of the equivalent of the Old Kingdom. So why is it called a cenotaph? That's because a cenotaph is an empty tomb or a monument which is in honour of a person or maybe a group of people whose bodies are somewhere else. So although this is a cenotaph to the Temple of Seti I, it's actually apparently to honour the god Osiris, whose body, or at least most of it, has some secret tomb somewhere. But it is assumed that this is just symbolic. I will explain more. So there is a large room at the end of the Osirion that has no original entrance and was essentially sealed. The best explanation for this room is from ancient architects, so I'll play you their clip.
By breaking through the middle cell on the eastern wall of the central hall, you enter what is known as the sarcophagus room. This crude entrance is the only way in or out, apart from one treasure hunter's tunnel in the northern end of the eastern wall. What is most interesting about this chamber is that scholars believe that the room itself is one enormous sarcophagus. There is no original entrance, and it is therefore safe to assume that it was never meant to have one.
Some refer to this room as the sarcophagus of Osiris, while others call it the blind chamber or the sealed chamber. This room is a mystery to archaeologists, as well as to the rest of us. Honestly, I have no answers to this part of the mystery of the Osirion, but I do have some theories. But for now, let's just look at what the archaeologists have to say about it. Let's start with a quote from Hadi al-Zaini and Seti from the book Abydos, Holy City of Ancient Egypt, 1981. Lying behind the eastern wall of the Great Hall is another transverse hall. It is exactly the same as the one on the western side, except that this hall had no connection originally with the rest of the building. Its present entrance is through a hole in the back wall of the central square cell of the eastern wall of the hall, and this hole was forced through in modern times. Yet during the reign of Seti I, this transverse hall must have been accessible, as he had decorated its saddle roof with a wonderful scene of the sky goddess Nut stretched out over the world. About 20 years ago from the time of the writing of this, the western part of the temple of Seti I was in danger of collapsing, so 14 great piers of steel and concrete were sunk into the ground to below water level between the western wall and the temple and the eastern wall of the transverse hall. But during this operation, no connecting passage or stairway linking the two buildings was discovered. So we still do not know how Seti's men got in to decorate the roof. In case that wasn't sufficiently clear, Seti was working on the assumption that Seti I actually found the Osirion rather than built it, hence the question about how his people got into the sealed room to decorate it. Of course, archaeologists since then have decided that the whole place was in fact constructed by Seti I. I obviously don't agree with that, but, we'll get to that at a later time. So let's just clarify exactly where it is. So from this diagram, if we're coming in from the right side, where you can see the black line coming down, entering into the Osirion, and then the Osirion, which is surrounded by the green water and then passing through into another black area, which is the room that is the sealed room or sarcophagus of Osiris. And on this diagram from James Westerman, you can see on the right-hand side the room looking a bit like an extra long barn in this diagram. So if it isn't obvious from this diagram, go to the very back, and in one of the little niche rooms, there is the back of the wall of that little tiny room has been smashed open, and you can go from there into this gigantic room, which is considered to be the sarcophagus of Osiris, or the symbolic sarcophagus. And it has no other way of access, except up in one corner there is like this weird little hole, which they say has been dug by robbers who were trying to get access to underneath the city temple, but doesn't seem to go anywhere, so they didn't have any success with that. As I said, this chamber is pretty big, so it's 20 meters by 5 meters, and it's got a rather unusual vaulted roof. And I mean unusual because it's not as if the blocks are shaped to go upwards. It's actually square blocks carved to look like they go upwards. It's quite clever, really. It is because of this room that archaeologists reached the conclusion that the whole building was something to do with Osiris, and that room was the tomb of Osiris. And this conclusion was made based on the reliefs that are inside this room, and they are of some kind of ritual. They are part of the book of the lower world, and they're a ritual scene which are typical for some of the tombs of ancient Egyptian rulers. And here is a quote from Edouard Naville. "This room, perfectly preserved, is absolutely empty except for a heap of sand in the northeastern corner. When this sand was cleared away, we found that it came from a hole dug there, evidently by robbers, as is in the case of many tombs in Egypt." Edouard Naville also pointed out the parallels between this room and the pyramid of Khafre, as you can see in the diagrams. So where does all this leave us? We have a sealed room at the back of the Osirion and seemingly no way to access it. Well, my theory is this, that there was a way to access it, and I've seen it in several other places where a very large block is able to be slid to open up an area, but the area that you walk through is a small area once the block has been removed. And here are a few examples of places where I think that has actually occurred. So this picture is from the Red Pyramid, and this picture is from the Great Pyramid, the Pyramid of Khufu. And this last picture is from a site called Qasr el-Sagar, which is an Old Kingdom, theoretically an Old Kingdom site, and it also has that same small block that can be removed, providing entry to a room which is effectively completely sealed if it weren't for this block that was able to be removed. Based on all that, I believe that Seti I found the Osirion, worked out how to break into the sealed chamber, along the way found a lot of interesting things, including information and objects, and decorated the area in order to claim it as his own and do the honouring of the gods. It is also interesting to note that he later sealed it up, so he didn't really want anybody else getting in there.